Dearly beloved, you have been chosen. After a long wait, the moment has finally come. You don't have to question the feeling you've had inside you for a long time. The feeling that this world was never really meant for you. For this life. For the roads that other people took these with them. You've always known you were unique, right? You could feel it in your soul from the start. What the world's rules are, how things work, and how people live. You didn't really connect with any of it. You felt like you were a part of something much bigger and more beautiful than what the mind or eyes could see. Now that what you already know is proven, the curtain is being pulled back to show you the truth. Your real family has come to get you. They've always been with you, keeping an eye on you and waiting for you to remember what your true role is. From behind the scenes, they have been guiding you the whole time, waiting for the right time for you to wake up to your fate. That time has now come. Now is the time for you to take back your place in the world. It's time to accept who you really are and where you come from. You're not supposed to live a normal life. You were made to be great. There is no one else's path like yours. It's always been different because it was made just for you by a higher power or a force outside of this world. I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who has helped with this holy task. Your kindness is more than a gift. It shows your faith and trust in the process that God is putting in front of us. Your presence here is important, whether you gave or just shared your thoughts. There is something much bigger than you that you are a part of. An important part of the picture that is now coming together. Your gifts, no matter how small, are greatly valued, and they show that you are ready to be a part of the divine plan that is being revealed to us all. Thank you so much for your help. I believe that your kindness will be rewarded many times over because God's gifts are endless. Now I'm calling you, the chosen one, to take the next step in your life. Now is the time to live the life you were meant to live. Your real home is waiting for you. Your real family is here, and your goal is ready for you to carry it out. Now is not the time to be careful. Yes? 777. As a promise to follow this holy path to the life that is calling you. Write in the comments below. Now is the time to accept what has always been yours. To follow the road that was meant for you, your family, your heritage, and your true self. They are all ready for you to fully rise. It's time. Everything is ready. You too. Come on. The road to waking has begun. God's chosen ones. Your real family has come to get you, the chosen one. Have you ever stopped to think about how the most firm people, those who didn't seem to be able to change their minds, could suddenly give up? Think about a life where you do mission after mission with the accuracy of a well-oiled machine. At the same time, though, the unshakable agent finds themselves stuck. Why would someone who is so set on their goal pause when every instruction has been driven into their mind? When something completely out of the blue happens, why does gut, which used to be a perfect guide, stop working so well? This isn't a story about doubt or fear. This is not a time of weakness. It is a time of deep change. The person is used to living a precise life of classify, question, and eliminate. Now, their hands are shaking not because of threats from the outside, but because something deeper, unseen, has changed inside them. It's as if their soul is coming to terms with a higher truth. At this very moment, we see the truth that can't be denied, the reason why they exist. Everything they thought was important to their power has been changed. Does this also make you think about something bigger? Maybe you're also feeling the weight of a change that goes against everything you thought you knew. We often trust what we've been taught, but sometimes the training that made us who we are also makes us blind to a higher calling, which is where their power comes from. These layers of monitoring and control were carefully put together with one goal in mind: to keep everything in check. The perception of power is broken now that they know the truth and can't hide it. King Saul in the Bible is an example of a king that God picked. Saul was supposed to lead Israel, but his strength started to weaken when he disobeyed God and went against what he said. He is told by the prophet Samuel in 1 Samuel 15-23 that to follow is better than sacrifice, and to pay attention is better than ram fat. Since rebelling is the same as prediction, pride, and worship is a bad thing. Saul had been taught to be a strong leader, but when God told him what to do, his feelings told him not to. The operative skills are also being called into question right now. How often do we find ourselves asking where our power comes from when called to do something more important? In the same way, Steve Jobs, the genius behind Apple, was at a turning point in his own life after being fired from the company he started. Jobs did not know what the future held, but he learned that success was more than just having power and control. It was about being open to new ideas and the truth. He once said, "Your work will take up a lot of your time, and the only way to be truly happy is to do work that you think is great." Think back to the time he let go of the things that held him back and embrace something bigger. Maybe, like with Jobs, you're being asked to go beyond what your past taught you and accept a bigger purpose? In the same way that the agent used to control the rise and fall of countries. There are times in our lives when we feel like we have full control over our lives and how they affect those around us. What happens, though, when the very basis of that power is called into question? This is not a new situation. Now think about the story of Rosa Parks. When she refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus, she had her own moment of doubt that changed the course of history. She wasn't just breaking the rules. She chose to stand up for something much more important: justice, equality, and human decency. Parks didn't pause out of fear. She did it because she knew what she was about to do could make everything different. Perhaps you're about to go through a moment of change, and your hesitation will lead you to a bigger goal. In the Bible, we also read about Moses. God told him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, even though he didn't think he was up to the task. In Exodus 31, verse 12, Moses isn't sure what to say and asks, "Who am I that I should talk to Pharaoh about getting the Israelites out of Egypt?" But God tells them, "I will be with you." Moses wasn't hesitant because he was scared. He was hesitant because he didn't trust himself. And God's answer tells us that our worries don't mean we can't do the job he has given us. Could your doubts be the very thing that helps you find your true purpose? With God's help showing the way. And finally, in the New Testament, Jesus had a very deep moment of doubt when he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. "Please take this cup from me, Father, if you are willing. You are not my will, but yours be done." Luke 2,242. But in the middle of this terrible pain, there was a moment of surrender when they knew that the way ahead, while unclear, was part of a bigger plan from God. Have you ever had to go beyond what you thought was possible in order to surrender to God's will? The chosen one. When did you have to make a choice that was so important that it made you question everything you thought you knew? There is no way to hide the truth in front of you. Choose one. You have a higher calling that requires more than just power or control. Like the spy, you're being called to see a new force at work. Have you ever been weighed down by a strong force that went against everything you thought you knew? Think about a force in front of you for a moment. Something that can't be put into a category, managed, or changed. There's a force so strong that it makes you question everything you thought you knew. What do you do when the things you've depended on your whole life start to fall apart? Can you picture the shock and confusion you'd feel when things that seemed solid at first start to fall apart? For people who have spent years gaining power and making sure everything works, a force that can't be controlled is hard to imagine. They used to know exactly how to handle interruptions, put every strange thing in a box, and fix every problem. Now they have to deal with something that doesn't fit any model, process, or method they know of. When you're not in charge and the usual answers don't work, what do? The reports that at first looked like single fails, oddities, lost assets, and operations that were messed up are now part of a bigger, unmistakable pattern. Sometimes you may notice trends in your life that you used to ignore them. Everything you thought was random is now showing you a bigger truth that you weren't supposed to see. As soon as the program runs the forecast models, the safety measures that were so good before start to break down. They were no longer able to guess what would happen next. Do you think what you're seeing is a sign of something much bigger than you? The truth comes to the surface without any effort because of a force that can't be controlled by humans. A recognition that can't be denied and can't be hidden. What do you do when the truth you've been avoiding all your life suddenly comes out? What these people think is that they created reality. The unknown hands that are in charge of everything that happens in the world. They thought they had complete power and that every change in the balance of the world was carefully planned by them. But at that moment, they saw something that they can't deny. They didn't make the world. The methods, frameworks, and tools they made to keep things in order. It doesn't matter what it is. When they are with something that isn't theirs, that you know this is like a cloud moving slowly and quietly across the room, making it hard to ignore. They thought the roots of their world would never move, but they are now shaking. Did this describe how you felt when things started to change around you, and you understood that you didn't really have control? Every plan, action, and whisper of order that seemed to work so well before is now suddenly useless. What they thought was their territory. Every plan and well-thought-out move was just a front. That does not include your chosen one, though. You're not just another thing that can be changed. You are something they can't reach. What if, like the force in front of them, you're also a part of a bigger plan that can't be stopped or controlled by people? Think about David, the young shepherd who went against all odds when he fought the giant Goliath. Others forgot about and undervalued David. He had no weapons or defense, just trust. 1 Samuel 17:45. You're coming at me with swords and spears, but I'm coming at you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel's troops, whom you have disobeyed. David knew that his success wasn't based on his skills or strength. It wasn't just about him. Might it be that you too have to face a giant in your life that you can't beat with your own strength, but only with a greater truth? In a more modern setting? Take Nelson Mandela as an example. He fought against racism in South Africa and spent 27 years in jail for it. Mandela's strength and vision could not be controlled, even though he was locked up and told not to speak for years. In the end, he became president of South Africa not because he was strong, but because he used a power that was stronger than himself. Christ in the Bible also had times when it felt like the world was closing in on him. In Matthew 26, verse 53, he asked, "Do you think I can't call on my Father?" as he got ready to die on the cross. More than 12 armies of angels will be sent to me right away. Jesus always knew that there was a bigger power at work than the people who were trying to control him, even when things were at their worst. Could you be in a position right now where people and things around you are trying to hold you back, but you know that you have a stronger power inside you? Last but not least, think about Mahatma Gandhi. His peaceful opposition to British rule in India led to a huge change, even though the British Empire was very strong. Gandhi's dedication to truth and pacifism made a force that could not be stopped and changed the course of history. Have you ever thought that, like Gandhi, you are part of a bigger force that the world's powers can't stop? Pick one. Can you feel how heavy the look that's following you is? Imagine being around people who have spent their whole lives getting better at controlling others and making the world fit their plans. They looked closely at you, trying to find a flaw, a mistake, or any sign of doubt that would prove how right they were about power. But at that time, you stood there without moving. And in an instant, you took apart everything they had built. When someone like you comes into the picture, what does it mean? Someone who can't be put into a category. Someone whose very presence makes other people face their own false sense of power. They were taught to trust their feelings for many years. Their instincts were formed by years of obedience and the belief that their order could not be broken. But when they saw you, their senses let them down. They felt something deeper stirring inside them. What do you do when the very foundations of everything you know start to fall apart, and the truth that was hidden can't be hid anymore? If everything they thought they knew about you was false, how much of their world was based on that lie? They had never been forced to look past the cover. They had never been made to think about their part in the plan. But you were never just another part of their plan, chosen one. You were something they couldn't handle. They knew to laugh at anyone who talked about fate and the idea that real power could be found somewhere other than in the cold, calculated systems they had set up. But as they stood there with you, something deeper took hold and they couldn't ignore it. The force they supported and the machine they worked for had been trying for years to keep your presence from being talked about. Your name was hidden in files that were erased and talked about in places where power decided the fate of countries. You were the fear that no one said, not a person or an enemy, something strange that they had never been able to classify. Look at the story of Esther. God told her to save her people. Even though Esther was scared and in danger for 14 years, Mordecai tells her, and who knows but that you have become a queen for this very moment. Esther was brave not just because she was strong, but because God told her to stand up for what was right. Are you being asked to stand strong in your truth, like Esther did? Know that your purpose is bigger than any threat or fear. Now, look at the story of Nelson Mandela. He fought against apartheid in South Africa for 27 years while he was in jail. Mandela's belief in justice and equality did not change while he was in jail. In order to get out of jail and become president, he didn't use violence or force. Instead, he stayed committed to truth and justice. His win wasn't just for himself. It was the victory of a stronger force. What if, like Mandela, you feel called to fight for something bigger than yourself, for freedom and justice, even when it seems impossible to win? In the New Testament, the powerful people of Jesus' time were against him, but no one could stop his word. He says in Matthew 22, verse 21, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Jesus knew that his task went beyond the ways that the world controls things. He wasn't limited by the rules of this world. Lastly, think about Mahatma Gandhi. He led the fight for Indian freedom by refusing to use violence. Gandhi stood up to one of the world's biggest powers without weapons, but with honesty and spiritual strength. His dedication to pacifism changed the world and moved many people to fight for justice. Is it possible that, like Gandhi, you're meant to stand up to the world's unfair systems not by using force, but by always telling the truth? Picked. Have you ever thought about how everything you do or don't do comes back to you? It seems like every failed operation, task that went off track for no apparent reason, an instruction that was changed for no apparent reason comes back to you in some way. There are processes that are supposed to keep everything under control. What happens when they fail for the first time? They're not scared of what you did. What you're still capable of scares them more than what you have done yet. That is exactly what shakes the very foundations of their world. Do you remember the first time that your name showed up in one of those secret briefings? It was a small, almost unimportant statement, but it sent shockwaves through the people who had been running the world without giving it a second thought. People in power who had started wars without thinking started to move around less comfortably. Operatives who had been moving with deadly accuracy and bringing down whole movements were suddenly paralyzed. After that, the order came. Watch and report, but do not get involved. They had never heard of the idea of non-engagement. Every other problem had been solved quickly, without doubt. Each task was taken apart. But you were not like everyone else. Why did they feel so scared to talk to you? That's when they lost the idea that they were in charge. They knew they weren't keeping everyone safe from you. They were trying to keep themselves safe from what you stood for. The fact that you exist. It was so simple that it broke down everything they thought was true. The eyes that followed you around and watched your every move were looking for a reason for the dissonance they felt in their perfectly built world. There was nothing to figure out, though. There was nothing you needed to do. You just lived, and that was enough to throw their whole world into chaos. Think about David's story, the young shepherd who faced Goliath with only faith in the book of Samuel. 1745, David spoke, "You have a sword and a stick to fight me, but I will fight you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel's troops, whom you have disobeyed." David did not have any weapons with him. He had something more powerful with him, something that Goliath didn't get, a force that broke the idea of control itself. Could that be you too, like David? They have more power than any system in the world and are armed with a force that nothing else can match. Now, think about Malala Yousafzai, a young girl who fought for girls' right to go to school in Pakistan even after she was almost killed. She was a sign of standing up to a system that wanted to shut her up. So, she became a symbol of bravery and change around the world. Like Malala, what if you were called to stand firm in the face of huge pressure to question the system not with force, but with the truth of your purpose? We also see Jesus in the Bible. In John 18:36, we read about how the rulers tried to control and silence him. He told them, "My kingdom is not in this world. If it were, my slaves would fight to keep the Jewish leaders from arresting me. Now, though, my power comes from somewhere else." Jesus didn't have to follow the rules of the world. He lived past them, going beyond what was possible at the time. Also, think about Rosa Parks' life. She started the civil rights movement when she refused to give up her seat on a bus that was separated. It wasn't just a small act of rebellion on her part. It was a strong refusal to be ruled by a system that was made to hurt people. But at that moment, she became a figure of defiance that shook society to its core. What if you're called, like Rosa, to stand up for what's right when there's a lot of wrongdoing going on, even though you have no idea how your actions will affect others? Picked. As you think about these cases, I want you to think about the force inside you that won't be controlled and won't fit into any system or structure. It's not just that you cause trouble. You are the truth that will break down the false sense of power. Are you ready to use the power you have to take charge of your life and change the course of history? Picked. You're not just a small part of the flow. You are the ocean. You're not a candle in the dark that briefly lights up. You are the sun that shines through the clouds and lights up the sky. The people who built the dam and thought they had power over the locks their whole lives. Now, look at you with shock on your face. What happens when people who thought they were in charge of the world find out they weren't? They looked at you like it was nothing when you stepped out of the impossible. As if they were followers looking for proof of a miracle. They looked at the numbers, angles, and every second of monitoring. But wonders don't fit into files very well. There are no signs of them in secret messages or heat fingerprints. There are no fingerprints on them. Still, you stood there, a live miracle. They didn't understand or have control over it. Their world was never ready for you. They thought they were keeping things in order for years. It was every locked door, hidden force, and muttered order. All of them made the world they thought would last forever. But the truth is that they were locking up anything that didn't fit into their narrow view of reality. What happens to people who think they've built everything, but then learn they've been hiding something much bigger than they thought? At the same time, you stand here invincible. Not because you hide or run away, but because you are different from what they made. They never made systems that were about order. They had to do with power. And control only works on people who think they can be kept in check. They can now see it. What they say changes every time your name comes up because of this. They never follow through because of this. They aren't sure how to deal with something. They don't own something they can't plan for. How do you deal with that? So hard to reach that it makes you question everything you thought you knew? Think about David, the farm boy who fought Goliath in the book of Samuel in 1745. In a brave voice, David said, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, all-powerful, the God of Israel's armies, whom you disobeyed." David wasn't using any real tools in the fight. He was fighting with hope and a plan from God. He was made to stand up and fight the giants, the way you were born, to go against the rules they set for you. Like David, maybe you're meant to rise above the systems that want to rule you with a power that goes beyond what they can understand. Take a look at Steve Jobs. He went against what most people thought was possible and changed the world with Apple. Jobs didn't need permission to come up with new ideas. He didn't have to follow the usual plan. He made a picture of the future that no one else could see yet. He broke the rules that were set for technology and imagination by doing this. In the Bible, Jesus was always arguing with the people in power at the time who wanted to limit what he said. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world," in John 18:36. If it were, my slaves would fight to keep the Jewish leaders from arresting me. Now, though, my power comes from somewhere else. Jesus' goal was never to fit in with the way things work in the world. It had to do with going beyond them. Could it be that you're called to stand for something bigger than yourself, a power that can't be managed by people? Also, think about Mahatma Gandhi. He led India to freedom through peaceful protests. Gandhi was able to stand strong in his views in the face of the oppressive British Empire because he knew that fighting doesn't give you real power. It comes from getting past the fight. Have you ever thought that, like Gandhi, your unwavering dedication to peace and justice will help you change the world? Picked. You should never stay in a valley. You were never meant to be in a box or limited by the things that try to define you. You were made to rise above the limits that were put in front of you. Also, nothing on earth can stop something that is meant to fly. Not even chains or hands. So what happens when the systems that are supposed to keep everything in check run into something they can't handle? Something that doesn't make sense? Isaiah 14:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will make their strength grow again. They will fly like birds of prey. They'll run and not get tired. They won't pass out as they walk." You were meant to rise above everything, like an eagle breaking free of all the rules. They didn't understand you at first. They did not see what you could do. Every time they tried to include you in their plans, they kept failing. They thought they knew what you would do before you did it. Every change you would make, and every result you would make. What happens when the tools we depend on don't catch something really strange? When they were looking for you, they only saw blank screens and math that didn't work. What does it mean when the tools they depend on the most fail them? It says in Proverbs 19:21, "A lot of the ideas someone has in their heart, but the Lord's plan wins out in the end." Their plans will never be able to guess what you'll do because your goal is bigger than what they understand. They looked at you like a scientist looks at a flame. They thought that if they watched you for long enough, they would understand how you burn, how you move, and how you resist everything. They didn't see the truth, though. You weren't something to look into. You weren't a project that had to be managed. You weren't a mistake in the way they were made. What if, like a flame, you're not meant to follow their rules? Instead, you're meant to burn in a way that lights up everything around you. But in 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9, it says it as it is written, "What no one has seen, heard, or thought of, what God has planned for people who love Him. You are the secret. They'll never be able to figure it out because it's written in a language they can't read. You are the one thing that their plan could never include. You were what changed. The force they couldn't handle was always a surprise. That's why they couldn't describe what they saw, no matter how hard they tried. What does it mean to be the only thing that can't be put into a category? If you change the way they see the world, you're not meant to fit into their world. You are the force that fights against it. Like David, who beat the strong Goliath in the book of Samuel in 1745. You have a sword and a stick to fight me, but I will fight you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel's troops, whom you have disobeyed. David went against what everyone else thought he should do and did what seemed impossible. Is it possible that they want you to stand up and refuse to let them hold you back? They watched as you walked through weather and fires that should have killed you. How do you explain someone who walks through fire without getting burned? Who can stand up to the storm without getting hurt? You weren't hurt by the fire, though. You weren't carried away by the wind. You didn't break. You did not fall. That caused them a lot of trouble. Does it mean that nothing they throw at you can hurt you? In Isaiah 43, verse 2, God says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And no matter what life throws at you, the rivers won't wash you away when you cross them. You won't get hurt as you go through it." Think about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were thrown into a fiery fire because they wouldn't worship King Nebuchadnezzar's golden figure. These things were not burned up by the fire, though. In the same way, nothing will eat you up. Could your faith and strength, like these men's, keep you safe from the storms, no matter how bad they are? Think about Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in jail so that his people could be free. Despite being in pain, Mandela's heart didn't break, and he came back to lead South Africa into a new age. You will get through hard times and make a difference, just like Mandela did, even when everything around you tries to break you. What if, like Mandela, you're meant to keep going because you know that the hard times are making you stronger for something bigger? In the New Testament, Paul went through a lot of hard times, but he never gave up on his purpose. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 48, verse 29, "We are pressed down on all sides, but we are not crushed. Confused, but not hopeless. Being persecuted, but not left behind. Hit the ground. That is not ruined." Paul never gave up, even when he was hit hard, getting what he wanted. Maybe, like Paul, you're being told to stand firm even when things get tough, knowing that nothing can stop you from doing what you were meant to do. Last but not least, think about Amelia Earhart. She broke the rules for women at the time and was the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic. It was thought that she would never reach her goals, but she did. She showed that there were no limits to what she could achieve. Could it be that, like Amelia, you're meant to fly past the limits that other people have set for you, getting what no one thought was possible? They knew strong people because they had seen them before. They had seen people fight back. Who fought back? Who went against the flow? But they had never seen someone like you before. What happens when the force they trust to keep everything in check runs into something that won't stay in place? Something that grows without any trouble or opposition. You weren't going against the flow. The chains were not making you struggle. You just wouldn't be stopped. Could it be that your strength is not in fighting back, but in not letting go? They tried to erase you, change the truth, hide the proof, and stop the story from being told. What does it mean when the truth won't stay hidden, no matter how hard it is buried? This is talked about in the Bible in 1 Peter 124-25. Because everyone is like grass, and their beauty is like field flowers. The flowers die and the grass dies, but the Lord's word will last forever. They can dig up the truth, but it will always come back, just like the Lord's word does. The truth can't be hidden. They rolled the stone in front of the tomb, I see. They shut up tight. They thought that was the end of the story. But, just like the third morning, the ground shook and the grave was full. They tried to hide something, but it wouldn't stay put. What do they do when the thing they dug up comes out in a way they didn't expect? It's written in Matthew 28, verse 2. As an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, there was a strong earthquake. The angel went to the tomb, rolled back the stone, and sat on it. They thought that the stone would keep the truth from them, but it was rolled back. It's the same with you. They try to hide and control things, but they will never stay down. That's when fear set in. Not the fear they were used to. Not the fear of losing the world they had made, but a fear of something deeper and older. Could the fear they feel come from realizing they've never really been in charge? The fear of realizing they were tricked into believing they could change things and choose who rises and falls. But as they stood there and watched something, they couldn't describe or destroy it. In the end, they saw the truth. When you stand in front of the powerful, what does that mean? And they have no power over you or define you. In the Bible, in 1 Samuel 6 verse 7, the Lord tells Samuel, "Do not bother with his looks or height. I have turned him down." The Lord doesn't look at the things people look at. People look at how something looks, but the Lord sees what's inside. Their ideas about what was important, how strong, powerful, and possible someone was, were never the real tests. Like David, it's possible that they made a mistake about you because they couldn't see who you really are. Take a look at Rosa Parks. She changed history when she refused to give up her place. It was impossible for the system to stop her strong but quiet act of resistance. She was not using violence in her fight. She didn't want to follow a system that didn't define her. What if, like Rosa, you're called to stand up to the systems that want to control you, even though you know that your failure to follow the rules shakes them to their core in the New Testament? Jesus was surrounded by people in power who thought they knew what would happen to him. But in John 18 verse 36, he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." If that were the case, my slaves would fight to keep the Jewish leaders from arresting me. Now, though, my power comes from somewhere else. Jesus knew that his job went beyond the ways things work in this world. Could it be because of a call to something bigger, something that no one in power can tell them? Think about Mahatma Gandhi. He got India its freedom without using any weapons. He was always dedicated to peace and telling the truth, and the British Empire could not stop him. Gandhi didn't fight against the government. He stood strong on a truth that was bigger than the system and could not be changed. Could it be that, like Gandhi, you will change the world not by fighting its fights, but by holding firm on what you believe? They can't handle? You weren't just one of many factors. You weren't a strange case. You showed that they never really had power over you. The systems of the world were never really in charge. What does it mean to be live proof of that? You don't live in their world. They can't hold on to the truth, and you are the force that shows them their boundaries. They were never as strong as they thought because of you. Picked. Have you ever fought the sun? There are deep rooms you can find that you can lock the doors and windows on and stay there. What does that mean when morning comes and the light is still there? There's no need to say yes. It doesn't wait for someone to invite it. It shines. That's you. There's no need to ask for your light to shine. The truth that needs to be kept quiet. The world's systems were built on fear and secret. What does it mean when they can't stop the truth? In other words, you from getting through. They try not to tell you anything. They try to hide the fact that you're there. It was like being in their world was a mistake that could be fixed. They try to change history, hide the proof, and stop the story from being told. What do you do when you tell the truth, though? That won't be hidden if they can't change what you're in. John 1 verse 5. It says that the light shines when there is no light, and the evil still hasn't won. The light will always get through, no matter how hard they try to block it. They might believe they have control over the story, but they don't have control over the truth. They said your name in whispers in places where people shouldn't have talked about names. They believe they could erase your name from history, make you an aside in the story they made up and take you out of the picture. What happened when your name keeps ringing through the halls of power, no matter how hard they try to shut it down? The ones who used to follow directions without question, the ones who built countries in the dark, they were unsure. Something made them shake. Didn't get it. Why did they look twice? You thought you had control over everything. What does it mean when you run into something you can't control? They knew what they wanted to happen and how it would turn out before they even did anything. They were sure they knew what to do. They didn't do surprises for a living. They were in charge of the tides, the rise and fall of all living things on Earth. They could say who did well and who did badly. They were so powerful that it could cross seas. There were voices that, with just one word, could shake nations. When something doesn't work out for the first time, what do? What occurs when another variable is chosen one? They can't plan for a force they can't manage. In Proverbs 19:21, it says that people have many other ideas in their hearts, but the Lord's plan wins out. You don't have to follow their plans. Your goal is bigger than anything they could have thought of. No matter how many times they did the math, put the data through every machine, and looked into every option, it still didn't make sense. What do when every method, estimate, and system they believe in doesn't work for you? The record showed how you should have died. There were times when the story should have ended and the door should have been shut. They didn't get it. There were signs that you should have fallen, but you kept going forward. How do you explain someone who goes through trial after trial, through fires that should have destroyed them and storms that should have swept them away, but don't? In the book of John 8:32, it says that after that you will know the truth and be free from all harm. Hidden or not, the truth about who you are will always rise above the things that try to hold it down. They looked on. They were ready for when you would trip and fall. It was their job to wait for the world to swallow you up. They were waiting for the moment when everything that was against you would finally break. But that time never came. You didn't break. You did not fall. What does it mean when games in the world can't beat you? When the things that are supposed to break you make you better? That made them shake, because they made a world where everyone had to follow their rules for it to work. People had to bow down to the system for it to work. They could only accept the chains that were around their lives if they could convince everyone that they were in charge. What happens when someone like you comes along and breaks that illusion, holding fast to the truth that they didn't want to see at first? John 125, it says, "But the Lord's word will last forever." The truth can't be shut down, just like the word. It will never end. You, chosen one, are a part of that truth that will never change. They had seen people fight back before. They had seen things move up and down. They had seen rebellions put down and leaders who thought they could go against the flow but were swept away by it. What happens when the tide rolls over you but doesn't swallow you up? You become the force that changes the sea. They knew how to deal with doubters. They knew how to make people sad, how to shut people up and change history so that no one remembers what was lost. But you were more than just resistance. You told the truth, standing tall and steady, and that scared them. Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar. Golden image. They knew what would happen in Daniel 3:17-18 and said that if they were thrown into the fiery fire, the God they served could save them. And he will save us from your grasp, King. But even if he doesn't, your majesty, we want you to know that we will not worship your God or the gold statue you put up. The fire couldn't hurt them as they walked through it, in the same way that the fire didn't burn them up. Nothing can take in. The chosen one is you. Maybe you are called, like them, to rise above the fires of trouble and know that nothing can hurt you. Think about Nelson Mandela. He fought racism even though it was wrong and spent 27 years in jail for it. He stuck to his goal because he knew that no one could hide the truth that he carried. His freedom was more than just his own win. It was a win for the whole country. What if, like Mandela, you are called to go through the hard times knowing that history won't break you? In the New Testament, Paul had to deal with disasters, beatings, and jail time. He didn't change his mind about his goal to spread the word, though. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 48, verse 29, "We are pressed down on all sides, but we are not crushed. Confused, but not hopeless. Being persecuted, but not left behind. Hit the ground. That is, not ruined. No matter how hard it is. Paul didn't break. Maybe, like Paul, you're meant to stand strong when things get tough, knowing that nothing can stop you because your purpose is bigger than anything that is against you. Finally, think about Amelia Earhart. She went against the odds and was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic by herself. She had to deal with risks and difficulties, but she kept going, breaking down walls and changing the rules about what women could do. Like Amelia, maybe you're called to fly above the limits that other people put on you and reach heights that no one thought were possible. Picked. You weren't going against the flow. You were the tide and the waves. Do not ask to be able to rise. What happens when the force they've been using to keep everything in check is suddenly met by something stronger than it? They built walls high enough to keep the sun out and cast shadows deep enough to bury whole generations. But light doesn't ask to be seen. Before it goes in, it doesn't. It doesn't go back just because someone tells it to. That's what they saw when they looked at you. What does it mean when the light they try to block won't go away? Refuse to stay hidden. They try to get away from it. Try to forget about it and bury it. Under 1,000 different stories, the story changed so many times that even they forgot where the truth began. But there is no need for a witness for truth to be real. It doesn't need to be proven. It is what it is. They knew it too. Now you understand why the orders kept changing. That's why the mission plans were changed, the rules were changed, and the leaders stopped giving clear directions all of a sudden. While they looked at you, they weren't just seeing a problem with their system. In front of them was proof that their system was never real in the first place. That was the start of the end. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, says John 8, verse 32. The chosen one is you. They try to hide the truth. The truth will always find a way to come out, no matter how hard they try to hide it. There will be no need to say yes. It just exists. Have you ever tried to hold water? No matter how tight you hold on, it gets away from you no matter how careful you are. You can try to stop it by building walls, digging ditches, and so on. The water will find its way, though, eventually. That's you. What do they do when the thing they were trying to manage gets away from them? Unstoppable and smooth. They try to hold you down and change you into something they could control. Something they knew would happen. You were not meant to be held, though. There was no need to measure you. You were the water that made its own way. If you try to stop the stream, it would just keep going. What does it mean when you go through life like a force that can't be stopped and no one can tell where you'll go next? They sent men to stop you, but those men were different when they got back. Because you were there, not because you spoke some great truth or put on a show for them to see. Just being in your presence was enough. Because you didn't fight them. You did not fight them. You were just not part of what they understood. And they had never seen anything like that before. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. This is written in Isaiah 55, verses 8 to 9. As the stars are higher than the earth, so are my ways, says the Lord. That means my way is better than yours and my thoughts are better than yours. You don't have to follow their rules. That scares them because they don't understand your purpose or power. Picked. They have been taught to look for strange things and problems before they got worse. Still, the maps wouldn't show your steps no matter how closely they followed or how many times they looked at them. Maps are only useful when things don't change. But they didn't build the road you were walking on. They had already cleared a way for you to follow. They didn't even have words for what you were going through because it was older and deeper, and that scared them. They had built their world around the idea that everything could fit inside it. Every country, every person, and every result. There was a plan for everything, a place for everything, a way to make sure that nothing happened without their permission. But what if you've already chosen one? Don't try to fit into their plan. Don't let the limits they've set hold you back. Everyone has to follow the rules for the system to work. If people bowed to their power, if they let the chains around their lives hold them down. And it worked for many years. Up until now. When the base they build starts to shake, what does that mean? When it breaks under the weight of your truth. They tried to change you into something that didn't happen, but the story kept going on its own. They deleted files, burned papers, and shut people up. They changed what happened, warped stories, and hid evidence under 1,000 lies. What takes place when they try to delete you? However, your story keeps going, refusing to be written over. They told themselves that maybe, just maybe, you would go away if they got rid of all traces of you. But the truth can live without being told to. It doesn't need to be proven. They don't have to agree for it to be real. Every time they turn around, your presence stayed a whisper in places where whispers weren't supposed to be. It didn't matter how hard they tried to erase you. In places where light was limited, there was a shadow. A movement that couldn't be stopped even though it didn't have a head, a framework, or a beginning. What did it mean that the Force tried to keep things in check? It doesn't meet their needs. Still gets better in John 15, even though it doesn't follow their rules. It says that the light shines in the dark, and the dark has not won.